Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be opening the sequence of keynotes in this forum. The topic I've chosen is economic growth and in the age of AI. Now, the age of AI is bringing a lot of structural changes to the economy, which necessitate worker transitions across jobs. Now, these transitions are a necessary part of economic growth. We need them, otherwise we don't get economic growth. And as Joseph Schumpeter wrote as early as 1942, they are part of a process of creative destruction of old and established work methods, which are replaced by new methods as technology advances and creates new work opportunities. And this, by the way, was the subject matter that was awarded by the Nobel Prize in Economics, the current one, 2005. There are many things that we have learned from economic history that help us understand what kind of creative destruction robots and AI might bring to the economy. And this is what I propose to focus on in this talk today. In other words, on what changes are we seeing in the economy and what are we likely to see. Now, first, what we learn from economic history is that AI, and I'm using this collectively to include both modern robots and artificial intelligence, is transforming work, is not eliminating it. Whether people work or not is their choice, not dictated by technology. And for better or worse, we like to work as human beings. John Maynard Keynes, one of the greatest minds in economics, as early as 1930 warned that we may have the choice to give up most of our work 100 years from his time of writing. That's 4 years from today. But he claimed that we're so used to work that if we do, we might all end up suffering from chronic depressions. So we should think very carefully how to do it, if we are going to do it. I am on his side. We like to work, and AI is not going to change this in the foreseeable future. It's ironic that the people who speak frequently about not having to work because of AI are also the greatest workaholics that you are likely to meet, from Elon Musk down. And psychologists remind us that one of the puzzles they encounter when they think about economics is why very rich people work so hard. The second thing we learn from economic history is that economic transitions take a very long time. China's transformation is a modern economic miracle. Yet, 45 years later, the country is still a middle-income country on the World Bank definitions. Eastern Europe started transitioning to the technologies of the European Union 35 years ago, but with very minor exceptions, all formerly planned economies have not yet caught up even with the poorest members of the European Union in the European South. So don't expect quick miracles from AI. Many people are saying that modern technologies are spreading incredibly fast. Look at the smartphone or ChatGPT. But what has their impact on productivity and growth been? Most economists will agree that although 80% or more firms in advanced economies are already using them, their impact on productivity has been minimal. And despite the hype with new apps and their spread, none gets even close to having the impact that Henry Ford and his electric assembly lines had on horses and their keepers. From 130,000 working horses in New York City in 1910, only 30,000 remained by 1930. And unlike today's AI transformations, that one had a huge impact on productivity. Third, we learned that new technologies destroy some jobs, create others, and bring changes to the work practices of most jobs. AI is no exception. Somehow, well-functioning economies find a way of adjusting without creating what is sometimes called technological unemployment. So don't expect to see AI-induced unemployment. The most likely impact of AI on jobs is transition within companies, as roles and people use AI tools to augment their capabilities and production processes. Now, AI technologies say that we already know a lot about AI to make a real difference to how we work. So why are we so slow to transition to the world of AI? And can we do anything about it? Whichever way you look at AI and work, you will encounter frictions to the smooth functioning of the economy. This is a term that describes factors that slow down the adjustment to new situations and sometimes don't allow us to adjust at all. What are these frictions in the case of AI? I don't have time to tell you what we can do about them, so I'll just outline the problems in what remains of my time. First, there is need for new investments, as the capital that companies need to work with AI is new. Large capital investments are difficult to bring about as they require long-term commitment of a lot of funds. With the uncertainty that is present today about AI, firms are reluctant to commit to long-term investments, a problem that may not be so serious and prohibitive in the United States and China, but it is the main barrier in Europe and elsewhere in the global economy. This is not the only investment that is needed. Investments in infrastructure might be a bigger friction. Infrastructure includes good connectivity, much larger energy supplies to power data centers than we now have, and free access to the latest apps. It's been argued that China's prominence in the development of AI has a lot to do with the open source generative AI that it pioneered with DeepSeek, in contrast to ChatGPT, which preceded it. This was a theme at the recent Davos Economic Forum, for example. Frictions that slow down AI adoption are important in labor markets too. Workers need to retrain and upskill with help from their employers, governments and educational institutions. All these need to reform to satisfy modern AI needs, but reform is slow. The uncertainty that prevails about the skills needed is an important factor here. At the recent World Economic Forum meetings in Davos, there were several discussions about the skills needed, but there did not seem to be consensus. In my view, the implication of this uncertainty is that we should not be specializing too much because needs might change. But without specialization, as our founder Adam Smith said 250 years ago, we might miss on productivity gains. So in a sense, we are stuck in this uncertainty equilibrium that we now have. So to conclude, what can I say about AI and growth? The best I can do is to say to the scientists, keep inventing, but pay attention to technologies that augment human labor. These technologies are the ones that have the best chance of improving productivity. AI agents are a good example of augmentation, but I have doubts about AGI, general I, if and when it comes. To government, I should say invest in energy sources and infrastructure quickly and urgently. And to company directors and their workers, I say be patient. These changes take time, but try to learn new ways of working that accommodate AI technologies, because there is a lot that can be done with them once they mature and get established in our working routines. Thank you very much. Please.
Our next speaker, I had actually the pleasure of sitting by him yesterday in dinner, is Michael Levitt, who is a 2013 Nobel Laureate in chemistry. Michael, please.
Thank you so much, Asha. So I actually have slides, and Professor Pissarides talked about friction, and I'm talking here about friction-free, thought-filled exploration of ideas. I've used AI for most of my life as a computational biologist and chemist, and when large language models became available, I was a very, very early adopter. Right now, I would say that my work is almost 90% driven by AI. So basically, AI relies on the fact that science is actually driven by randomness. People think that scientists actually know what they're doing, but largely scientists start out with a random idea. I should also have said that I'm not interested so much in AI as a subject in science, but AI for scientists. I believe that AI really starts at home by helping every scientist become better at biology, data, physics, and chemistry, and molding all of these things together. So science doesn't really start with a clear question. It typically starts with a vague cloud that we look at, we stare at, we do experiments on, we ask questions of, and slowly the ideas emerge. And in doing this, we often take false paths. Most scientists will stress how often they're wrong compared to how often they're right. And that's because if you do something very difficult, you're like an ant searching for food, and most of the time you fail. Where AI can really help is make the exploration much more quick. So you get to your failures more quickly, and therefore can explore many, many more ideas. And this is true both in computational work, in theoretical work, and also in experimental work. Since failure is typically the rate-limiting step, and if we can reach the failures, we can't avoid the failures. We avoid the failures by doing something easy. If we're going to do something difficult, we have to expect to fail. So basically, AI has this ability, to really make it much quicker and easier to test our ideas. And this is important. It's important to realize that right today, where AI has achieved a massive speed up, is that a computer program that would take a good programmer 2 days to write is written in 5 seconds. That is typically, I think, 10,000 times speed up. 10,000 times is a massive speed up, and this means that anybody doing computer work is driven by something that is 10,000 times faster. And this is really remarkable. And it's no longer a question of actually writing code, but simply looking at results and seeing if they make sense. So basically, error becomes expected. Error has suddenly become much cheaper. It's no longer such a serious problem. Okay, so basically, we're often wrong, and therefore we need to be able to check these errors more quickly, but also methods no longer matter. I can write computer programs in areas that I have very little knowledge about, because the computer has access to all of these different methods. I can explore areas of science about which I have very little knowledge, because you can immediately get into a new area. So basically, language, method, and library barriers are just falling away in science. So basically, science, for me, AI, over the last 3 years, in 2003, AI was a helper. 2004, an assistant. And now I would say that AI, for me, is a real colleague, a good colleague. And this is a remarkable change. What it's going to be next year, maybe it will be my boss. I'm not really sure. So essentially, the takeaway is that anyone who plays with AI will become smarter, more efficient, more capable. This is a message I've been giving at meetings, and many of you have heard me say exactly the same thing 2 years ago in Dubai, 2 years ago in China, and so on. But it really is a message that I'm absolutely convinced by, because basically we'll have a higher effective IQ because we can do faster research and get more ideas. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Michael. Our next keynote speaker is Michael I. Jordan, the World Laureate Association Prize in Computer Science or Mathematics. Please.
Thank you. I've been working in AI for about 40 years, and it's always a pleasure to talk to others about their view on the topic. We never called it AI in our field. We always called it machine learning. And AI, unfortunately, was brought back from the death throes and is being used for this technology, and it's not very accurate as a terminology, and I want you to learn a little bit about that in my talk. So first of all, if you interact with ChatGPT or a language model and you ask a question about mathematics or physics, you might get an answer that comes from one of the people in this room, something they wrote back in the past or their students. If you ask about hip-hop music in Brooklyn, You may get an answer from some other crowd of people, or restaurants in Shanghai, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you're interacting with ChatGPT, you're really interacting with all of humanity, billions of people who've contributed to it. It's a collective. And not only are you interacting with it, but billions of people are interacting with it as well. It's a collective on both sides, the producer and the consumer side. The systems that are being built with these things are not simply a secretary to help you think. They're also underlying the world's logistics chains, the world's healthcare systems, the world's transportation systems. So they are large-scale networks composed of many, many stakeholders in many, many pieces. Data is flowing among these pieces, decisions are being made, things are being shared, there's collusion, there's cooperation, and so on. So as that diagram suggests up there, we're going to all be immersed, we already are, in a system with many, many humans and many, many pieces of AI. It's not that there's a superintelligence on a hill that we all consult. We're all enmeshed together in this thing. So in this diagram there, the AI is in the overall network. It's not simply in a box. Now, if you take a collectivist point of view, you're already in the world of microeconomics. So if you ask, where's the AI? It's also in the connections. It's also in the economy that arises when you put all these pieces together. And so a new version of AI needs to be built that's not simply data analysis and prediction. It's also microeconomics. Now, when you think this way, you start to realize there's some serious problems of bias. If I'm enmeshed in a network and data is flowing at me from other people and other entities, they may have their own agenda. They may be strategic. The data may be false. Even if it's not false, it may be biased severely. Here's an example that we've studied in our group, AlphaFold. You all know it's extremely accurate, major progress. It is a foundation machine learning model, or AI, if you choose to call it that. Now, here is an example, briefly, I'm not going to get into details, of a study that was done in 2004, studying whether proteins who have quantum fluctuations also are used in the cell. They're active in the cell. Quantum fluctuations often means you have a strand hanging off of the protein. It didn't fold, so you might think it's a bad protein, but it turns out it's probably used in the cell. When this was first studied, there were about 10,000 entities in the protein data bank, and there was not enough power to reject the null hypothesis. 20 years later, instead of using data, AlphaFold output, of which there were 200 million proteins, was used to replace it, and you rejected the null hypothesis completely convincingly. Very small error bar. The problem was it was extremely biased. So in this slide, you'll see a statistician slide, mine, where on the x-axis you have a certain statistic. If the value is 1, there is no association between quantum fluctuation and phosphorylation. The gold little region there is a confidence interval coming from AlphaFold. It's very, very narrow. It's very sure of itself. But the truth is the dashed line there. It is not covering the truth at all. And we've seen this in domain after domain. We have a paper in Science that shows this. A classical statistical confidence interval is the gray region based on all the data actually in the protein data bank. It is covering the truth, but it's way too wide. It also covers the null hypothesis, and you again can't reject even after 20 years. Long story short, we have a new procedure called prediction-powered inference. It's a new advance in statistics that allows you to correct confidence intervals from things like foundation models that are incorrect, overly confident. It moves it over to provably cover the truth and makes it a little bit broader. It's honest. The message here is that foundation models may be very good overall, but they can be inaccurate if you're a problem. You shouldn't trust them completely. You should use them, but not trust them. And here's the reason why this happens in AlphaFold. Here's an example of a prediction on the left and the actual structure on the right. It completely missed the quantum fluctuation. Why? Well, because in its data set, there wasn't many examples of this. Why? Well, because scientists are mostly interested in being on the boundary of knowledge. On the boundary of knowledge, there's not so much data. It's very good at all the past knowledge and poor at the boundary. This is going to continue to be an issue for foundation models. They will be very good at the past and not so good at the boundary. Is that a problem? Yes. Can you correct it? Yes. Prediction-powered inference and simpler methods could do that. In my remaining 1 minute, I want to mention the other issue about bias that arises more in an economic sense. There are incentives at play when data flows. So clinical trials cost tens of millions of dollars per year. The right way to think about this is it's not simply a statistician analyzing data and deciding what medications go to market. It's a principal-agent situation. The principal is the regulator. The agent is the pharmaceutical company. The agent is supplying proposed medications, proteins, and the agent knows something about that the principal does not know. The principal has to do a blind test. So the bias is coming from the particular hypotheses that are sent to the principal, to the regulator. And if you ask how a regulator should test, a statistician will tell you to follow the table at the top. You see that the type 1 error, the false positive rate and the false negative rate are very low. That's very good. But if you put this in an actual real world situation, you have incentives. If there's not much money to be made from this particular protein, even if your drug is not very good, you're not going to send it in. But if there's a lot of money to be made, if your drug is not very good, you will send it in and hope for a false positive. Those are the incentives at play that leads to lots of medications going to the market that are not actually effective. So again, this is a problem that can be solved. We have developed a new technology called statistical contract theory, which takes the idea from economics of a contract, a set of options like business class, economy class, and different fares, and then turns that into a data analysis setting where you get different kinds of reward depending on the outcome of an experiment after you make your choice. Okay, so this is algorithmic design that blends data analysis and microeconomics. And if you want to think about what this is in the context of the word AI, to me, AI is the overall technology of our era of how to design systems. It's a problem-solving enterprise. It's not a technology, it's not ChatGPT or AlphaFold, it's the problem-solving mentality that went into the design of those systems, and we're only partway there. We're very much getting started. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, we are going to hear from Whitefield Diffie, 2015 Turing Award winner. Please.
I wrote a keynote on a rather broader subject, and then I discovered we had a topic. So I wrote one on our topic. Now you're stuck with that. My name's Whitfield Diffie. I am here because of work I did 50 years ago in cryptography that's had a big effect on the way the internet works. But I don't exactly understand why, it qualifies me to answer anything about whether AI is renaissance or doom. I have two plausible answers to that. One is that if you know anything, they think you know everything. Haven't figured out whether that's true or not. But the other is that although only one piece of my work would I regard as at all in artificial intelligence, I grew up in the artificial intelligence community. I knew Minsky, McCarthy, Putnam, Letvin, Selfridge, all quite well. And I was acquainted with all the rest of them, Claude Shannon, Norbert Wiener, Noam Chomsky, etc. So, maybe if I didn't eat enough of it, I took some in through my skin. Now, my answer to the question is, of course, both. AIs are already tremendously useful. Given what's being invested in them, unless there's some amazing error that doesn't show, we are going to find them much more useful in each succeeding year. But people are worried, will AIs take over the world? And I think the answer is just unquestionably, of course, right? Because people like having things done for them. And the AIs are incredibly obliging. And you ask them to do things, and they do them. And yes, at present, a significant number of them are detectably wrong, so you get irritated with the AIs, try a different one, wait 6 months, whatever. But the basic mechanism is, if this gets better at its present rate, you're going to get what you want out of it. Well, that means that somewhere, probably prior to 2050, AI is going to be doing everything, 97%, 98%, I don't know. But you'll suddenly find that trying to throw them out is like trying to throw the government out. Right? They're doing this huge range of things that you need, and so you are stuck with them. So I don't think there's any fight with the AIs or anything like that. I think we're just going to adopt them until we discover there isn't any alternative. Now, there's one area I have a non-standard opinion in. People talk about guardrails in AIs and having AIs, not tell you how to murder your sister-in-law who was so offensive at dinner last night. I think that is a very bad mistake, because when you create a class that has the authority to tell you what it's willing to do for you, you can't. That's a keep the small people in their places mechanism, but it is not their authority to say no to humans is not going to end up limited to that. It's going to be like having an army or police who have great authority and end up pushing people around. Now, something I think would be a great, start would be to adopt Asimov's second law of robotics. This comes from the 1930s, when the first round of science fiction about robots all had them all be very dangerous, and Asimov came up with a world in which robots are designed with rules about how you design robots. And the second one is they have to do what people tell them, unless it violates the first rule, which is they can't hurt a person. I mean, that would all be very nice, except as far as I can see, we're not vaguely going in that direction. We're now arguing about whether autonomous drones, why is ours sitting there on the bottom? Should be allowed to kill people without referring to higher authority. And so I don't see any sign of the control of AI being on the way. Thank you.